Welding is a fabrication process whereby two or more parts are fused together by means of heat, pressure or both, forming a joint as the parts cool. Welding is usually used on metals and thermoplastics but can also be used on wood. The completed welded joint may be referred to as a weldment. Some materials require the use of specific processes and techniques. A number are considered unweldable, a term not usually found in dictionaries but useful and descriptive in engineering. The parts that are joined are known as apparent material. The material added to help form the joint is called filler or consumable. The form of these materials may see them referred to as parent plate or pipe, filler wire, consumable electrode, for arc welding, etc. Consumables are usually chosen to be similar in composition to the parent material, thus forming a homogeneous weld, but there are occasions, such as when welding brittle cast irons, when a filler with a very different composition and, therefore, properties is used. These welds are called heterogeneous. The completed welded joint may be referred to as a weldment. How does welding work? Joining metals. As opposed to brazing and soldering, which do not melt the base metal, welding is a high heat process which melts the base material, typically with the addition of a filler material. Heat at a high temperature causes a weld pool of molten material which cools to form the joint, which can be stronger than the parent metal. Pressure can also be used to produce a weld, either alongside the heat or by itself. It can also use a shielding gas to protect the melted and filler metals from becoming contaminated or oxidized. Joining plastics. Plastics welding also uses heat to join the materials, although not in the case of solvent welding, and is achieved in 3 stages. Firstly, the surfaces are prepared before heat and pressure is applied and, finally, the materials are allowed to cool to create fusion. Joining methods for plastics can be separated into external or internal heating methods, depending on the exact process used. Joining wood. Wood welding uses heat generated from friction to join the materials. The materials to be joined are subjected to a great deal of pressure before a linear friction movement creates heat to bond the workpieces together. This is a fast process which allows wood to be joined without adhesives or nails in a matter of seconds. Common joint configurations. Butt joint. A connection between the ends or edges of two parts making an angle to one another of 135 to 180 degrees inclusive in the region of the joint. T-joint. A connection between the end or edge of one part and the face of the other part, the parts making an angle to one another of more than 5 up to and including 90 degrees in the region of the joint. Corner joint. A connection between the ends or edges of two parts making an angle to one another of more than 30 but less than 135 degrees in the region of the joint. Edge joint. A connection between the edges of two parts making an angle to one another of 0 to 30 degrees inclusive in the region of the joint. Cruciform joint. A connection in which two flat plates or two bars are welded to another flat plate at right angles and on the same axis. Lap joint. A connection between two overlapping parts making an angle to one another of 0 to 5 degrees inclusive in the region of the weld or welds.